I've been a park ranger for a little under 6 months, and I almost quit in my first week. You see, I've always preferred being in nature as opposed to the city, mostly because I enjoy the quiet, and when I was a kid, watching Crocodile Hunter and other nature conservation shows and stories. I love animals. The things I've seen and had to deal with, though, I'm not sure they classify as even real. The first night I showed up to work, I arrived 10 minutes early. Man, little did I know at the time, it was the worst mistake I had made on my first day. It's a small park and it didn't need more than 2 rangers on site at a time, but most of the time we just had one. I was greeted by the ranger from the shift before on arrival, and given the rundown of what I would be doing that day. Mostly just hanging out in the information building and monitoring trail and site cameras. Once every couple of hours in the 10-hour shift, I would patrol one of the 4 quadrants the park was divided into. What no one told me my first day is that the night shift park ranger either goes missing or dies within the first week. I found this out later that night, and not from the first shift ranger. After the first 2 hours of monitoring cameras and helping the 2 people that stopped by the information center, I set out on patrol, choosing the quadrant I went to at random. In the end, I decided on the east quadrant, one of the more undisturbed areas of the park. I hopped in the sorry excuse for a patrol car, more like a buggy or an ATV than a car, and headed towards the east quadrant. It was a quiet drive for the most part, except for the sounds of crickets and the occasional owl's hoot. But as I got closer to the east quadrant, I noticed these sounds began to die away, slowly but surely, until all was silent. I preferred the quiet anyway, so these sounds dying away were less alarming than it was calming for me. I had a smile on my face as I began making my round. I expected not to find many, if any, campers in this section of the park, but about halfway through my patrol, I came across a bald man stumbling down the trail. I stopped the car a little ways away from him, weak headlights shining directly at him. I pulled out my flashlight and hopped out of the car, approaching the hobbling man. "Excuse me, sir, are you alright? You don't look that well." He had stopped, dead in his tracks when I noticed him, but I hardly took notice of it as I approached. The only thing that struck me as strange was the fact that the man had his head tilted down, so a shadow cast across his face. He spoke with a speech impediment. He spoke slowly and deeply, and it sounded like his mouth was stuffed with bread. "Ranger." He hadn't moved a muscle, and I never saw his mouth open as he spoke. It struck me as odd, and I stopped with a little bit of distance between us. The injured-looking man hadn't moved at all since I had spotted him. "You must be the new ranger." I noticed a slight amount of movement in the shadows splayed across his face, and a small amount of noise, like something being sharpened or sliced. I found it odd that this man was able to identify me as the new ranger, but maybe he was just a regular in the park. "I am. Do you need help?" "It's been so long since I've had a meal. Ranger, help me." I had brought along a few protein bars with me, wanting a snack for the shift, and I had brought some along as I didn't know how long the patrol would take. "Come with me back over to my patrol car. Have you been lost out here, sir? Do you need any assistance other than food?" The strange man made no move to come closer. He just stood where I had first found him, stone still. "I am only hungry, Ranger." I stared at him for a few more moments, before turning to walk to my patrol car. "Then come with me, I'll give you some protein bars, and after that, I think you should still come with me." I trailed off because at that moment, I felt and heard something behind me, breathing down my neck and breathing heavily. From behind I heard, "Last mistake you'll ever make, Ranger. Now I can eat." I heard the snapping of bones from behind me as the strange man slammed into my back, winding me and knocking me to the ground. I tried to catch my breath and scramble up and towards my patrol car, but with surprising speed after such a forceful blow, the man put all of his weight onto my back. I heard a guttural sound coming from the man behind me, and felt a slimy smattering of something wet drip onto and soak through my uniform. I had begun to recover from the blow to my back, and I noticed I still clutched the flashlight in my hand. I took in a sharp, quick breath, bracing myself as I twisted and swung wildly, connecting with the butt of the flashlight to something as his foot slid off my back. I took a look up at the man and noticed the most horrifying image I had ever seen up to that point. His mouth hung open in the most inhuman way, and rows of long, needle and saw-like teeth, the number of which was impossibly large. Drool dripped from his mouth, and the sickly sweet smell of rotting flesh and death assaulted my nostrils. The man was posed like a tiger ready to pounce as I stared at him, but the longer I stared in horror at this monstrosity, the more I noticed that he wouldn't move a muscle. The creature in front of me snarled as I began backing up slowly, scooting my way across the ground towards the patrol car. "You got lucky this time, Ranger. I'll get ya next time you come to this place, just like the last." He made a noise, and an unearthly noise like stones grinding together mixed with the call of a wild animal. Something about his face gave me the impression he was amused, like he was laughing. I got to my feet and kept eye contact as I opened the door to my patrol car and climbed inside, trembling and struggling to get the key into the ignition as I stared at the creature. I noticed he still didn't move if I blinked, so luckily I didn't have to strain my eyes, but multitasking and spatial awareness were already not my strong suit. I struggled for another 5 minutes before starting the patrol vehicle back up, and I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, swerving around the man and trying to make my way around the circuit to get back to the information center. The haunting laughter of the creature followed me as it echoed throughout the forest. I feel like he let me go on purpose. It's like he got bored of easy kills and now he wants to hunt me. I hastily completed the circuit and made it back to the information center. This thing had told me that he had taken out other rangers in the past, but there's no mention at all of anything like him in the park. So as soon as I made it back to the information center, I began to write out a list, a reminder for myself and the next ranger after I quit this place, because at the time, I convinced myself I was going to be able to quit. I took a sheet of printer paper from the machine and began writing. Rules to survive the night shift. Rule number 1. Never break line of sight with the bald man with the strange lisp. If you do, pray he lets you go. The prison I work in holds no prisoners. It's pretty weird, yeah. The only time I get to see them is when they arrive. The guards have to stand in a line facing the new inmates as they head into the prison, never to be seen again. I don't know what's weirder, the fact that our prison doesn't even have a name, or that we never see the inmates at all. Not to mention, some of their sentences are pretty harsh considering what they're being convicted for. All the prisoners are on death row, however. We're not in charge of giving the executions. That's the job for the warden himself to deal with. When you hear death row, you usually think the worst of the worst. But these prisoners' bad deeds range from gambling, intoxication, over-smoking, and sometimes for some reason, infidelity. That's right. Some prisoners are put on death row here for that. Every part of the prison is completely divided via airlock doors that need administration's approval for entry and exit. So, if you want to make it to these cell blocks, you need to radio in with them. And yes, there are airlocks for the men's and women's bathroom each. All prison personnel are not allowed to be in the same parts as the prisoners. So, if they're in the cafeteria, we can't be in there or in the kitchen either. If you fail to finish your duties, let's say cleaning in time, you're getting a reduced pay for that week. And if you ever wind up in these same areas as the inmates, you're considered dead and a letter is sent home to your loved ones. It's really backwards if you think about it. The inmates who are on death row practically have ample opportunity to escape at literally any point they want to. I mean, it's not like the guards can do anything about it, because we literally can't. But our job isn't to think about that. Our job is to make sure nobody gets in or out. I don't know. And personally, I don't want to know. I've seen the stories in this place. How people's curiosities and attitudes lead them towards a life of torment and pain. I have seen and heard all the warning signs to know that not some, but a lot of things in life are better left unknown rather than anything else. So I never questioned it. Never gave it one thought in my mind in my 15 years of serving this prison. And never, ever did the unanswered question ever consume me to the point where I just had to know. Unfortunately, I couldn't say these same things for one of my work friends. His name was Sebastian. He was in his mid-20s, was an idiot and therefore was always curious. He told me that his dream job was to work for NASA or SpaceX, or any company studying space. He always loved learning and loved talking about education. That and the weird prison that we worked in. I think it was about 2 years of working here that he completely broke and decided to do some investigating on his own. Reception, administration, the warden, not even some guards were willing to say anything to him. And eventually, all of his pent-up curiosity was finally answered to him, with his death. It was 11 p.m., the time when all the prisoners were asleep. I was on the night shift, making sure everybody besides some guards and janitors were off the site. Sebastian wasn't supposed to be on site today, so I was pretty surprised to see him there. He was very distinguishable from the other guards. What with his baby blue eyes and his almost perfectly white hair, not to mention his under-average height. I asked him, "What the heck are you doing here?" Sebastian stammered, just doing some overtime." I knew that it was BS and he did too. We didn't do overtime at this nameless prison. He knew that I knew it was baloney, and so I told him, "Follow me outside, come on," and he complied. We walked together from the indoor courtyard to the indoor gym, to the indoor administration, where he was given a stern talking to by the head of security, and eventually to the outdoor area, where that son of a gun tased me until I blacked out cold. I was awoken by the head of security, where he told me that he had climbed into the vents, what with his small stature and all. And my job was to track him, and he was moving fast and I was the only one who knew him really well. The administration gives me permission to check every single part of the prison. I only asked to check these cell blocks. They told me that I was a goner because that was where all the prisoners were being held. I told them that Sebastian would be there, or I would quit tomorrow morning, and they let me through. I ran as fast as I could, from the indoor administration to the indoor gym, through the indoor courtyard to where I was stopped by an airlock. I radioed in with the reception. "What the heck? I thought I just said to let me through to the cell blocks." The only reply I got was static. "I told them otherwise," said a deep voice behind my back. I turned around and saw a man, wearing a two-piece business suit, and pure Damascus 14-karat gold sunglasses. He had no face, no ears, no nose, no hair, and his skin was pure gray. He was the warden. I need to be let in here. He's going to be considered dead, but I can still save him." He ignored my statement, walked over to me, and said, "Do you ever wonder what we keep in here? What kind of sick and twisted things are stored in this prison with no name? What kind of people come in here with deeds so vile that you just want to take them out yourself?" Just as he had finished talking, I heard yelling from the other side of the airlock. "Help me! Open the door!" I looked through the window to the airlock to see a faint silhouette of a man. The warden continued on. "Well, we don't house inmates in this prison." As the screaming man came running at full speed towards the airlock door, I saw a horrific sight. "We house wolves." The screaming man was Sebastian. Half of his face was gone. I could see his skull, his left eye was missing, and his other eye was crying red. He was begging to open the door, all while me and the warden stood there watching him. One man stood in defeat. The other showed no emotion, not with his stance, not with his head, not with anything. "These wolves," the warden continued, "are the addictions of man. Smoking, gambling, killing, yes, even sex. They're all here as the beings they really are, wolves slowly chowing down on their prey." Suddenly, a pair of 8 footsteps came even closer, and Sebastian slowly stopped yelling and started to just cry, as he realized that his only hope had abandoned him, symbolized through the warden walking away from the airlock. The last thing he said to me was, "When you're done here, you're fired." I ignored him and watched, as Sebastian stopped crying and began screaming, not for help, not for me or for the warden, but in agony and pain. He was eaten alive from the bottom up by the wolves of curiosity.